test between participating cameras. The only comparison that we will be making, as with the 2009 camera assessment series, is each camera's relationship with film. And of course, now we're talking about a new color management workflow that should get even better results from these cameras and better results even from film.
The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has been working on a standardized 4K workflow for 7 years. It's called ACES, and ICAS is the first time it will be technically evaluated by the industry.
Evaluation. This presentation and the study behind it were designed to help potential users of single-sensor motion picture cameras better understand the factors that comprise image quality. Personal taste are required to evaluate a camera's image quality. We created scenes designed to challenge these cameras and to reveal their differences. We recorded each camera at the highest quality and used external recorders to obtain the least compressed output available. Warner Brothers Motion Picture Imaging prepared the images using the least amount of color correction necessary to make reasonable comparisons. We also used the Motion Picture Academy's new ACES image interchange framework where appropriate. Our evaluations are of cameras available to us in February 2011. The Arri Alexa, the Sony F35,
now they have an F65
MX.
Now they have an Epic.
Kodak 35mm 5213 and 5219 film. The Phantom Flex high-speed camera. The Weisscam HS2 Mark II high-speed camera. The Sony F3. The Panasonic AF100. The Canon 5D Mark II DSLR. The Canon 1D Mark IV DSLR. The Canon 7D DSLR. And the Nikon D7000 DSLR. We tested each camera for sharpness, low light sensitivity, exposure latitude, highlight detail, shadow detail, color quality, skin tone reproduction, compression losses, and shutter artifacts. We tested at 2 locations over 4 days and involved almost 100 technicians, almost all of whom were volunteers. There are 2 factors that combine to create a subjective impression of sharpness. One, the ability of the camera to resolve fine detail, and the other is contrast. The test chart we used was a 3x5 foot Siemens star chart which combined both the resolution and contrast factors. Here's how the cameras compared at their maximum resolution. Some were designed for the big screen and had more than 2K resolution. Others had less because of various design priorities.
You see the DSLRs are at the bottom. The red one is very close to the film here. And the other cameras are... I'm sorry, I wasn't talking to the microphone. I said the red
Now we'll
one
see how the
film
measured differences in sharpness between these cameras looks in real life. We used extremely sharp Fujinon zoom lenses capable of 4K resolution and blew up the image to see comparative sharpness.
These are blow-ups, and so you should be able to see differences depending upon where you're sitting in the theater. I can see pretty clear differences from here. I just can't see how well you can see at that distance. Whenever you're looking at a film test, sit close. Now that's like artificially sharpened.
The still images from these DSLRs are razor sharp. The soft images you see are the results of video image processing within the cameras. The next quality we'll examine is the camera's sensitivity to low light levels. Natural light can be more than fast and cheap. It can also be quite beautiful. With film cameras, we traditionally measured ISO by how much light it took to create a gray tone in the middle between black and white. But this method doesn't work well with digital cameras because, unlike film, we can manipulate the response curve. Without changing the overall exposure, we can change the midtones of a digital camera to resemble the brighter tones of a sitcom or the darker tones of a mystery. So we believe the most accurate way of measuring a digital camera's low light sensitivity is to measure how much light it takes to barely see an image emerge from blackness. To make things complicated, a camera's blackness isn't really black. It contains imperfections called noise. Generally, the more noise there is, the more light will be required to see the image or signal above that noise. Thus, cameras with less noise, which we call quieter cameras, can discern smaller amounts of light and will usually have superior low light sensitivity. We measure the cameras with a precise backlit chart, and computer analysis quantified the minimum amount of light each camera could discern. Here are the results.
Well, film was very, very sharp. You notice it's not as sensitive to low light as some of the digital cameras.
But measurements from charts don't always predict how real scenes will look. Stephen Lighthill, ASC, shot a devilishly dark scene of a woman upset that her husband had just bought a Porsche.
Which is my
All
Porsche.
the cameras were shot at the same lens aperture. Is the range between the very darkest and brightest amounts of light it can record. We measured the cameras on two different backlit dynamic range test charts that accurately produce light over a contrast range of 65,000 to 1, or 16 stops, greater than any of our cameras could record. On one of our charts, we set the cameras so that the brightest point of the chart was at the highest light level the camera could register. We then looked at how deeply into the shadows each camera could see. Cameras with a high dynamic range looked like this, while cameras with less latitude looked more like this. Here are our results.
Notice film, it's very, very high, and the Alexa is pushing film, and everything else is respectable, but not in the same class.
Matt Siegel lit this scene to show how each camera handled the shadow detail. The lady puts on her coat. just as important as the total latitude. For this comparison, we set our middle gray comparable to a film stock with an exposure index of 800 and illustrate the loss of resolution in specific colors. We chose the extremely clean 444 Sony f/35 as our reference. Note the loss of fine detail and aliasing in some of the other cameras.
This f/35 is a CCD camera. It's been superseded by the f/65, but you can see how clean it was. It was just it was a wonderful reference. But that's now obsolete technology. And the Panavision Genesis had the same basic sensors as this. Why is such a big
Color may be the of colors we can register. Bit depth is the number of gradations output from each of the red, green, and blue channels. But can your eye and monitoring device really see a difference?
These color subtleties are not easy to see, so we'll run variations of this 3 times. So just look as well as you can with your eyes, and then, because it's not always easy to see the difference.
Ultimately, there's no right or wrong. It's simply what you happen to like. Our final comparison involves shutter artifacts. Many popular CMOS sensors scan the image from top to bottom, like this. Other sensors capture all at once, like this. As a rolling shutter moves, its motion interacts with camera or subject motion and causes a distortion or motion artifact. This is politely referred to as a rolling shutter artifact, and impolitely referred to as jello. Claremont camera designed a drum full of vertical lines, and we spun it to see how they appeared to bend because of the intersection with the moving shutter. The red line is a perpendicular reference.
The closer to parallel they are, the less shutter artifacts you're going to see. The high-speed cameras are going to go 1,000 frames a second, so they're very, very clean. And the 5D Mark II is such a big sensor, it takes longer to scan, so that's why.
Intersection with the moving shutter causes different kinds of distortion depending on what direction the object is traveling.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you again. Mahalo.
But please remember, we had to build special test gear to see those artifacts.